Can whiskey drinkers read? That's what we're going to find out as we talk about the launch.
That's what you came up with.
You didn't even let me finish the intro. Can whiskey drinkers read? That's what we're going to find out as we talk about the launch of Nico's new book, Texas Whiskey. Stay tuned. Welcome to a very exciting episode of Texas Whiskey. As always, I'm your host, Jimmy Hayes Nelson. Most people just call me Coach Jimmy, but the reason you're here is because the man to my right, the doctor, Mr. Nico Martini.
Hi, Jimmy.
Hi.
How's it going?
You wrote a thing.
Just to clarify, you don't have to read to enjoy my book. There's lots of pretty pictures.
Oh, cool.
Nor do you have to even drink whiskey.
Oh, you don't have to drink whiskey, and we don't have to read.
Nor do you have to know where Texas is, but the book is called Texas Whiskey.
So Nico wrote a Dr. Seuss book about Texas. Oh, there's probably a market for that.
Man, there's a whole bunch of them. There's one. There's something about like there's whatever the Mockingbird nursery rhyme or fairy tale. They turned it into like they made a children's book called Tequila Mockingbird.
Oh.
Somebody gave it to me.
Okay,
shockingly. Yeah, you know.
Very rarely do we have to reset the show 5 seconds in, but we're going to do that because Nico and I are very excited about this. You wrote a book, and we're going to talk about it today.
Yes.
So the Texas Whiskey book, as you've been plugging into our lovely little show here, something we've been waiting to talk about. But before we do, I think we need to pour some whiskey. You would think we'd been drinking before the show. I haven't. So what are we drinking, Nico?
Okay, so today we're rocking a Balcones True Blue Cask Strength. This is actually a Total Wine single barrel pick.
True Blue. So a lot of people have probably seen True Blue around Balcones. Usually it's a bluish label, right?
Yes.
And what makes this one different?
So this is a Cask Strength. I'm sorry. There we go. This is Cask Strength. So what proof are we looking at here? That would be 126.2.
Wow. Well, that's one to start with. 126.2. So we should say all the important things about the book early in the show,
right,
before we get to the bottom of this glass.
Oh my gosh. What do you smell? Let's see. How's it going? How's your
I haven't got that far yet.
Oh yeah, you gotta nose it, baby. Yes. You know what? I get there's a little banana. A little overripe banana.
See, I was thinking maple-ish, like there was something like sweet, but
oh yeah, no, totally, like a candied pecan.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
everything goes back to dessert with you. I like this.
Well, that's what their tasting notes say.
Oh, it's very drinkable for 129 proof or whatever you just said it was.
Yeah, and it's a corn whiskey. So this is I believe this is 100% blue corn. There it's a straight corn whiskey.
That's lovely. I'm a True Blue fan anyway.
Yeah.
I have True Blue at home and I make old fashions.
Have you had
True
the
Blue.
Cask Strength?
I haven't had the Cask Strength. I've had the regular one, and then I bought a bottle of the limited edition Texas Rangers bottle, but I have not opened that yet.
That's not True Blue. That's baby blue.
Oh.
Yes. True Blue.
Well, when we have the have the full Balcones episode, we'll get to go through all of this.
Yeah, which is coming up. So yeah, so there's True Blue, there's Blue, is it True Blue 100? I think there's True Blue 100, there's Baby Blue. These are all corn. These are all blue corn whiskeys that Balcones does. It just kind of.
Now I'm going to go back and look at all my bottles.
It depends on how old they are, and it depends on obviously the Cask Strength that indicates the proof.
I think I see Balcones. I see the word blue, and I just assume like, oh, these are all variations of the same thing, and obviously they're not.
No, kind of.
Right.
They kind of are, but I don't know. We should ask Alex if they're all finishing in different casks.
Well, Balcones is probably one of most of these distilleries you see before us that are highlighted in your new book, Texas Whiskey. Congratulations, man.
Thanks, man. This is
labor of love here.
Yeah. So it's finally dropping on July 6th.
Cool.
I'm really annoyed because as we sit here filming this, it shows up tomorrow.
Yeah. So it's like, do we have a picture of the book that I can hold up? And if we were shooting this tomorrow,
Right.
you would. But I think we have some images that they'll put up here and post, and everybody gets to see how beautiful this book is, and it really is.
I'm sure somewhere along these lines, there's a beautiful image of the cover, which is it's gorgeous.
Very similar to the logo of our show.
It is the logo
It is
of
the
our
logo
show,
of our show.
basically. I don't know who breached whose copyright, but
I know.
you know,
We'll
whatever.
worry about that later.
Doesn't matter. It's all we're all in this
paid off
together.
in whiskey.
Yeah. So I about 5 years ago, I teamed up with the San Antonio Cocktail Conference,
Right.
And I did a bunch of media stuff for them, and then I kind of helped them head up their education program. So I was the director of industry outreach.
Every time you say education program with whiskey, I feel like you're like talking to children about whiskey. I'm sorry, that's totally derailed, but there's something about education program, like you're sitting around with kids and saying, "This is corn," and continue.
This it was mostly held at bars.
Okay, so
not at
not
preschools.
children, right.
Yes, we very rare will you see the playground activation at a
Right,
whiskey festival.
sure.
Generally
So you're
frowned upon.
educating.
So basically what that meant was I would invite people to come do seminars at the San Antonio, and I got a random email from this company called Cider Mill Press, and they basically said, "Hey, we have this cocktail book that we're going to be doing. It's called Texas Cocktails. We like what we've seen from you with the San Antonio Cocktail Conference, and we wanted to know if you would be interested in writing this book." And I said, "Okay." I was a little nervous because the Texas and cocktails aren't real. I mean, we have them here; they're very good.
Right.
We didn't make a lot of them.
Right.
No. Yeah, that's not our.
We
this
have our
isn't New
take
Orleans
on existing cocktails,
isn't
but we
New
don't have
York.
any original. It was born and bred here in Texas.
Yeah. So I said yes and did some quick research and then went back to him. I'm like, "Hey, so this is going to be 100 different bars and 100 different bartenders and their cocktails." And they're like, "Oh, that sounds great." I'm like, "Okay, cool. I'm going to crowdsource a cocktail book."
Nice.
Kick ass. So Texas Cocktails came out 3 years ago. And then at the beginning of 2020, this thing called COVID-19 happened.
I haven't heard about it. Tell me more.
It's a pandemic, Jimmy.
Okay, well, that's a different show. Okay, so yes, and then?
Yes. We'll have a doctor on later to explain what
Explain to
pandemics
me.
are and
Thanks.
the difference between children and adults, which
Children,
apparently
adults,
is
and
confusing.
COVID-19.
Yes, right. Okay.
This is all the after show.
So COVID hit, and the startup company that I was running, we did. It was called Bar Draft. It's still around. It's called Bar Draft. It's draft ready cocktail mixes.
They're lovely.
They're great, and I'm really proud of them. And we were in all of these big, huge accounts, and it's Tampa Bay Stadium and at the Venetian, and
I remember having a celebratory party with you as we were watching like a McGregor fight or something, but that was when we signed the contract and was like, we made it, and we all celebrated it, and we were like, we thought you'd finally turn the corner with this thing. I remember that,
and then all of a sudden
went away.
the people who invested in our company were like, "Hey, so you're not our core competency, so we're not going to give you any more money. Sorry, bye." And that was it. And so I was like,
left with what's next.
So I was like, okay, well, I don't want to do any of this right now. I want to kind of take a step away. There's a pandemic going on. I'm going to email my publisher and say, "Yo, you need to let me write a book about Texas whiskey." And I did.
Because between the time you had released the Texas Cocktail book, I think we talked about this a little bit before. Check out previous episodes, please. I feel like you continued to go more down the rabbit hole of Texas whiskey, specifically with your connections, with your.
I had
whole
already started
world.
making Grayson, it was already
Right, so
kind
it
of
was
going.
all in the works, and so it just made sense. They're like, okay, I can write. I may not have a lot of actual original Texas cocktails to fill this book, so I had to crowdsource that one.
Right.
This is a subject matter that I could actually fill a book on.
I can tell the story
Yeah, and
of-
anybody that's ever sat around and drank with you before knows yeah, you got a book's worth of information in your head about just Texas whiskey specifically.
Yeah, I wish I could remember it all at the same time, but
yeah, I'm sure.
But yeah,
And I'm guessing there really wasn't. There wasn't
not one.
a book, right?
No, there's not one.
As we've discussed before, and if you're new to the programming, the whole concept of Texas whiskey is only 14 years old. So it is, in the world of whiskey, we're the new kids on the block, right? And so big time.
Yeah.
We're the new kids on the block that are making quite a bit of noise and getting a lot of attention. So the timing on this thing, there really wasn't a need for this because
when a transfer student shows up and everyone's like, Hey. Well, hello.
Who's the new kid?
You're new.
You're new,
you're generally untainted by all of this bullshit.
And you have great hair. Let's know more about you.
Right.
But it's really exciting. So the timing of this really was perfect to come to them and say, hey, I think there needs to be a Texas whiskey book.
And so I literally emailed John. I was like, hey, you need to let me write a book about Texas whiskey. And he responded with, you're not going to believe me, but on my to-do list is to ask if you want to write a book about Texas whiskey. And I said, yeah, now, like right now.
It's awesome how the universe works sometimes.
Let's do this right now.
Everything else falling apart.
Yeah. And so he's like, great, cool, let's go. When do you think you could have it done? And, I probably told him, by early next year. And he's like, cool, could you do like 3 months? I'm like, God, all right, fine.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
What else do you have going on, right?
But the thing is, like what I learned from the first book was the first book was so much coordination.
Right.
That's all it really was. I was texting bartenders and bar owners and being like, yo, that recipe that you sent me, you didn't quantify what dragon sauce is. Do you have a recipe for this quarter ounce of dragon sauce? Oh, sorry, man. Yeah, we make it our special. Great. What's the rest? Do you have any picture? Like, it was all just coordination.
Because the whole point of that first book is so, and I have the book at home and it's great and it's in my little collection of, hey, I want to make a cocktail tonight. And you pop that open and kind of go through and I'm like, I have it. Okay, I can make this one, right? So that's kind of the point of the book is so people can make these cocktails at home.
Yeah, and there's a whole bunch of them that there's no one's ever going to make because there's like centrifuges and all sorts of bullshit. Yeah. But it's okay.
Right.
Like I also wanted to highlight the interesting things happening in the state. And
so going into this book, so what you learned from that one, this one's going to be a little different take on the execution, I'm assuming.
I mean, what this basically turned into was, okay, who are the distilleries or who are the whiskey makers in this state that are, in my opinion, doing it the right way. And so
you want to define that?
I mean, not trying to convince customers that they are something that they are not. There's a lot of that here. Yes. And so lots of people will slap a picture some spurs on a whiskey and say
Texas, y'all, right?
Straight out of San Angelo. Here's this 100-year-old. Okay, all right.
Indiana.
Yes, and they all bought it from Dickel or they all bought it from MGP. And it happens. It's whatever. Like the Texas is a brand. If you slap Texas on something, you're going to sell more because we're loyal as hell here.
Right.
And
that's what's so crazy that Texas whiskey is only 14 years old because Texas and whiskey just makes sense. I mean, I understand like Kentucky and everything else.
But dude, they didn't 15 years ago because like whiskey wasn't a thing. Honest to God, like unless you were from Kentucky.
But I get that. But I'm just thinking, okay, let's think of everything that's stereotypically Texas, right?
Sure.
Cowboys and ranches and horses and everything people think they're going to see in Dallas and they have to go to Fort Worth to find. Saloons, where you're going to drink what if you're a cowboy? Whiskey. So that's why when we started talking about this, I was like, oh yeah, Texas whiskey, that's a thing, right? And you're like, no, it hadn't been.
Nah, man.
Right.
No, not so much. Yeah. So basically what this, after kind of taking a look at everything and doing a bunch of research and just deciding which distilleries I wanted to highlight, it became, let's highlight a distillery. So that is much more, I'm going to have a long conversation with you and
you, Mr. Distiller?
You, Mr. Distiller.
Gotcha.
And out of this, God willing, at least an hour, hopefully 2.5 hour long conversation where you tell me all of the things in your story, I turn that into a profile. And I was like, okay, honestly, that doesn't take that. Like the turning it into a profile was the thing that took the most time. But I'm like, I can have all my source material. There are 37. I think there's 37. I should know this number. It's either 37 or 36 whiskey makers that are profiled in there. And so I was thinking, well, dude, the 3 Zoom meetings a day, and this is pandemic.
Right,
Everyone's
so
on Zoom.
anybody.
Doesn't matter.
Right.
I'm not going anywhere.
Sure.
Eventually we wound up. We went.
Yep.
We wound up going and visiting some and kind of having conversations that way as well. But the majority of it was like Zoom. So it was like, okay, cool. If I can have an hour and a half long conversation with 4 different people in a day, wow, dude, I can have all of my source material in about 2 weeks.
That's all
and
recorded,
I did.
and then you're like, okay, right, absolutely.
And then I can go back and reference
Sure.
and remember the conversation that we had. And, I kind of peek behind the curtain. What I would do is I would take our Zoom meeting and then I would run it through a transcription service. And so then I would be able, I would have a searchable document.
Right.
So it would be like, okay, True Blue Cask Strength. What did Jared say about that?
Right, that pops
and
up
then
in the search.
boom, we
Yep.
got it. Okay,
Yeah.
and then just kind of go at it that way. So yeah, I had the majority of the source material pretty quickly, and then it kind of turned into let me be with the whiskey and let me
Yes.
sort of, kind of get into the mindset of kind of being able to talk about each one of these.
Sure.
And
Good thing you have a collection that no man will ever make it all the way through. God bless their liver.
Yeah,
So,
I have all of the Texas whiskey right now.
Yeah.
Not all, but man, I feel like
lot
I
of
have
it.
all. It sure feels like Sarah thinks it's got all.
Right.
Yes, my wife is
So as
sick of
you're
how much Texas whiskey.
As you're repouring real quick.
As I'm repouring.
Right. So, we have a little special
This
as
is
we're talking
delicious.
about. It's lovely.
Holy cow! I forgot how good this
You were
whiskey
asking
is.
me which one I wanted to taste, and I just kind of pulled that one out. I was like, I made a good choice.
Yeah.
So you may be saying, well, how do I get this book? Right now, we're actually running a fun little special for you. Is if you go to texaswhiskeybook.com, we have a whole litany of specials for you if you're going to get the book there right now. And I'm going to read those off to you at this point. First off, you get 15% off the book. You have the option to get it personally autographed by Dr. Nico Martini. And then what we're going to do is put together some fun virtual tastings. We're live Q&A. It's like you're sitting across the table. So what I've had the privilege of doing for many years now, which is sitting and drinking with Nico and asking him all the questions. You'll have that same opportunity as we put those together. You will be entered into a raffle to get a bottle of Grayson, the batch 1.
Yes.
Right, which is impossible to
Gone.
find now.
It's gone. Yeah,
right?
it's gone.
My 2 bottles at home have yet to be opened because I keep going, not yet. But
Dude, open your bottle.
I know.
Come
I'll take it to my
on.
trip. I'll take
All
that to
right.
California
Okay,
and
do
introduce
that.
those people to it.
Yes, do that.
And then last but not least, you're going to get an invite to quarterly tastings and events and stuff that Nico and I are going to put together. So go to texaswhiskeybook.com, get your copy, and then tag us on social media as you get the book. We would love to see it. Nico on Instagram is Texas Whiskey Book, and I am the Coach Jimmy. And so we would love to see that as we put this stuff together. It's really super exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. So, yeah, we'll probably keep that up for maybe like a month after the release.
Sure.
Because,
Give everybody an opportunity to win.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
as you were
100%.
putting the book together, and I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, was there
about it?
something that surprised you? Was there a story or something that you were like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that? Or you had forgotten that you were like, this is really cool, specifically somebody, because sometimes we go so down a rabbit hole of something we become so familiar with that you're like, oh my gosh, the readers are really going to geek on it. This is a cool little story.
I mean, the one that I liked, the one that just for whatever reason came out of nowhere for me was Crowded Barrel.
Okay. Yeah.
So, Crowded Barrel, it's the dudes. If you're a whiskey fan, you're probably at least moderately familiar with the Whiskey Tribe on YouTube. The Whiskey Tribe guys, long story short, they have the world's first crowdsourced whiskey company. And what that means is they have a group of people that are members of their Patreon that are the decision makers for what the distillery is doing.
So they created a huge community
Yes.
of whiskey lovers.
Yeah, there's like 300,000 people that follow them on YouTube.
And so great guys. And
Yeah.
they have this whole community of people that are like big whiskey fans. And so they had this show going on and they're like, okay, we have this big audience and people are actually paying to like get our content. What should we do with this money?
Yeah.
And they decided, let's make a whiskey. Right? Am
Absolutely.
I following along right?
Yeah.
We have some of this interview that maybe we'll put that in one of our shows of the conversation we had when we went down there. So continue.
Yeah, it was a lovely conversation just because about, it's there's a thing that sort of happens when you meet a celebrity and whatever that means.
Sure.
Like
what that means to you.
In whatever respect celebrity is to you. We were both actors. We have actor friends who have been in major movies,
right?
Big, huge TV shows
on Broadway, on network television, right?
And so there's always there's a bit of a when we're hanging out with whoever, then you could end up meeting yada yada. And so whatever celebrity means to you, there's this sort of thing that happens. What was really, really interesting and what I thoroughly enjoyed was I checked out the Whiskey Tribe and like watched a few episodes before we went and met with Daniel. And then meeting Daniel, and it was like it took at least 4 minutes before I was like, oh man, you're a hell of an actor. You're a hell of an actor because who you are is so drastically different than what you portray. And I love that.
But like in a cool way.
In a very, very, very cool way.
Phony, false way.
No.
He definitely has a lot of presentation about him. Like when you go down and I really am excited to like share with the audience the tour and stuff that we did. It makes me want to go back down again. But you can tell it's very artistic. It's very performance based. We talked about, I think he had a musician background and like there was a lot of things that he brought to this world that he had previously as a performer that
but I mean
the same thing, right?
Very much like a lot of artists that you'll interact with. He's totally introverted.
Yeah,
like he's a total introvert, and but it was like in a really kind of great way. It's like okay, I almost having been around acting and whatnot for a while, I sort of envy the people I always envied the people that were actually introverted, but then they could flip the switch and then they put the show on. Yeah. Because at the end of the show, the switch flips back and they're like, it's so much easier to kind of segregate what you have to be presentation wise,
right,
as opposed to who you actually are. I feel like, man, everything that I do, it's all the fucking same. Like it's like when you read my book, it will sound like I'm sitting there talking to you,
which I love. This is what I love about the book, which I love about everything Nico writes is knowing you for 20 whatever years that I've known you. I'm like, yep, like it's just you. There's no. The same thing, like when we put this show together, the amazing people here at Vokal were like, hey, we just kind of want two guys sitting around drinking whiskey and talking. And I think as the shows have progressed, as I continue to watch what we're doing, it was at the beginning trying to make this thing a professional show. And I feel like we have some of that. But at the end of the day, it's like, oh, these are the same conversations we'd had if we were somewhere else. And that
100%
is pretty cool as well.
Yeah.
As far as other stories, the other one I'm going to touch on because I just feel like it's a really cool story because we have Balcones there and we have Garrison Brothers here. Do you want to talk a little bit about the birth of Texas whiskey and what technically happened versus what was about to happen? I always think that one's fun because for people that aren't familiar at all, these are two brands that a lot of people know that have a lot of... In fact, I was just at Disney World last week. I went to a place in Disney Springs called... like Enzo's Hideaway. It's a little restaurant. I walk down and so I'm in Florida and the card on the table it's a Garrison Brothers special they're launching with 4 different old fashions. And it was just, I got excited because I'm like, I'm not in Texas. Yeah. This isn't home base.
It's awesome.
And this is being featured here. And so it's really cool when I start talking to buddies of mine or people outside of Texas and like, oh, I know this brand or I've seen that one. And I feel like the ones that come up more and more is Garrison Brothers and Balcones. And I was like, oh, it's funny because it's pretty much kind of tied together with the story.
So, yeah. So, the birth of Texas whiskey. It's interesting because when you talk to there was a lot of things that happened at Balcones, and part of the profile is literally type in the name of the former owner and the word lawsuit, and you can read whatever you want about whatever happened.
So this individual isn't there anymore.
No, Chip is not there anymore.
Okay.
So Chip,
just take that as we tell this story. This isn't about what's going on now there, but this is kind of the birth of things, and I feel like that's actually it's a good story.
Yeah, what's funny to me is like the idea that it goes back to, man, this happens in whiskey all the time. It
happens in a lot of businesses all the time.
Yeah.
This isn't like unique to whiskey.
Yeah, no, I mean specifically, this happens all the time in whiskey specifically when people are thinking that, like I posted something the other day on Instagram, and it was a very old 14 years. It was a very old bottle of Balcones.
Okay.
And Chip or Tate Distillery, what Chip is doing now, that's going to be launching something sometime this year. Okay. And so if they do, man, we'll have him on. He's fantastic. Like he put, man, talk about a showman. Oh my God, yes. Okay, he's transparent to a fault.
Awesome.
So
Can't wait.
So I posted something. I posted a picture of this. And it was like, oh yeah, hey, Chip Tate, blah 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 blah. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, no, I like Chip. I really like Chip. I think he's very very good at making whiskey. I'm excited about his new whiskey.
Right.
Like I want to taste this.
Sure.
Like because he's very good at making whiskey. That being said, Chip hasn't been at Balcones in a very long time.
Sure.
And all of the Balcones that I'm like gaga over, Chip
had nothing to do with.
Chip didn't make it. Right. No, it was Jared. It was Jared and the team, and like
and
who
Jared's
Balcones is now. Like, and it's just like, oh well, yeah, you know, it's all the older stuff. I'm like, no, you don't think that people get better do you think we're better at making whiskey now than we were 13 and a half years ago?
Absolutely.
I'm gonna say yes.
Yes.
So, dude, like, yeah, it's.
And we've talked about this before. Like, is older better? And it was like it all depends. And if the techniques have gotten better, you know, and so anyway, tell the story.
Okay, so essentially, the way that Texas whiskey began, it began with Daniel Garrison of Garrison Brothers.
Would you like some?
Yeah. Oh, actually, yeah.
That's a really nice bottle.
If you've got a single barrel, this was the other fun one that I discovered doing the book. I genuinely did not necessily like Garrison Brothers before I started working on this book.
I adore it. I really
had it.
I keep going back, and it's just
I will say that
and stuff, but it's just maybe I'm just extra, says the guy sitting in the suit. But I love Garrison Brothers. I really do.
I will say that initially for me, back when I was doing the cocktail book, and like I talked to Dan. I talked to Dan. Like I like Dan. He's a great guy. He's a great guy.
I look forward to meeting him when we have the Garrison Brothers episode.
Yeah. So he. Great dude, very steadfast in his methods.
Yeah.
And when I personally think Garrison Brothers has gotten a lot better at making whiskey. They're also releasing older whiskey, so that may be like, well, nah, dude, it's just older whiskey, and that's why it's better. But when I initially had Garrison Brothers, I was like, nope, too corn forward. It's overbearing, like yeah, and I was just like, Garrison Brothers, and then started this book. I'm like, okay. All right, Garrison Brothers. Like, let's do this whole thing. Was it more about
the taste, or was it more about? I know you're kind of like friend to friend as long as I've known you. I feel like things that get a lot of hype and are popular, you're a bit counterculture, a bit also. So I was curious, did that play a role at all?
No, mainly because I knew who they were.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know. There's controversy with Garrison Brothers, and all that honestly means is there are people that are annoyed at how expensive it is.
Right.
I swear to God,
you've got to have a luxury. We've talked about this. You got to have a luxury brand of everything. You can be mad about how much like a Rolls costs or
Right.
how much a Ferrari, then don't buy that car. Right.
and you know, like now being familiar with their brand, I understand why it's so expensive. Like they go about it a very specific way, and there are just things that they have never been willing to cut costs on. Therefore, their single batch is going to be $70,
I respect somebody that's
the
the quality
or their small batch rather
is like, hey, this is what it is.
Yeah,
we have this standard, therefore it costs this much. I have no problem with that. So we keep bearing the lead. We need to tell this story. So
Dan Garrison decided that he wanted to make whiskey, and so he headed off to Tennessee. Kentucky.
Sure.
And I'm sure he went to Tennessee as well. He headed off to Kentucky, and somehow he managed to get into all of these conversations with all of these great bourbon makers. Like he talked to Freddie Johnson, and he talked to Booker No, and he talked to there's a whole bunch of dudes with their names on bottles of Kentucky whiskey.
Their last names are whiskey.
If they've been alive in the last 30 years, he probably talked to them about this. And so, and the thing that's what he told me was the thing that kind of sealed the deal for him was this idea that the honey barrels, which is like the primo barrels,
right? Are these barrels that like they actually made honey in? No. What is a honey barrel?
Honey barrels just like that's
the money one.
Yeah.
That's okay. Cool.
That's you can call it a money barrel. Sure. It's the money barrel. He's like, yeah, man. I kept talking to all of these distillers, and every time that they would talk about the honey barrel, it was from the hottest part of the distillery. And I'm like, well,
so the best stuff in their distillery came from the hottest point.
I'm like, the whole damn distillery is going to be real hot if I make it in
Texas.
Right, exactly,
Right.
Exactly.
Sure. Okay.
So he got a bunch
the dots here.
Yeah, so he got a bunch of tips. He came back. He started putting together a distillery. He eventually hired. He was Dave Pickrell. Dave Pickrell is kind of the Johnny Appleseed.
Dude, he's like the hired hand master distiller of many spots, right?
So his big ones are Whistle Pig and what's the name of the distillery? Mount Vernon Distillery. He had a big part in redoing that. He also worked.
When we first started hanging out, that's a name that continued to come up. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, so this guy's important,
Yeah.
and he's kind of he's the hired gun of like, if you're gonna start a whiskey and want it to be legit, that's who you go find, right?
So Dave had just left Maker's Mark.
Okay.
He was the master distiller at Maker's Mark forever. And
that tiny little distillery in Maker's
that's
Mark.
that small thing that went
you might have heard of it.
Yeah. So he had just left Maker's Mark, and he was trying to figure out what he wanted to do. And Dan called him, and he's like, "Hey, man, I will give you I will give you a 12-ounce fillet every evening and all of the whiskey that I have to drink if you will come down here and teach me how to do any of this shit." Mm-hmm. And Dave was like, "All right, cool." And so he came down and lived in an Airstream on Dan's property for 2 weeks, teaching Dan how to make whiskey. And at the end of it, Dave went away. Garrison Brothers was Dave Pickrell's first consultation.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, totally. And so, which was super cool. So this is all happening, and this is going on.
But
and
it's
then,
smart of Dan. Like if I'm gonna make something, I'm gonna start a new genre.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go find the best person
Totally.
from other areas to make this thing happen.
Exactly. Right? So that's going on. Chip Tate, founder of Balcones, is in Waco, and he's like, "I'm making single malt. I'm going to make this single malt." And he starts working on single malt, and then he hears about Dan Garrison.
This is about the same time period?
Yeah.
Okay.
He hears about Dan Garrison. He's like, "All right, cool." And so he's like, "Hey, I'm going to go down." And he goes down and he visits the Garrison distillery that they're still kind of putting together and whatever. And as he's leaving, Dan turns to Donis, the master distiller, and goes, "He's about to release a Texas whiskey." And he's like, "What are you talking about? Like he's so far behind." And he's like, I don't know. That dude's squirrely. He's gonna release a Texas whiskey."
Okay, so
I don't know what the deal is.
So Dan learns this stuff
Yes. Dan starts making Texas whiskey.
And then Chip wants to be like, let me know what you're doing. And he just kind of shares, he opens the book.
Sure, shows up, like, this is what's going on, this is what I'm thinking about,
We're gonna
blah,
talk
blah, blah.
about this. And as you guys read the book, what you're going to find out, and if you watch other episodes of our show, is what keeps coming up over and over again is this collaborative, we all win spirit that's here in Texas that isn't in a lot of places. And I feel like it kind of started here. It started with how it...
Sorta.
A little bit.
A little bit.
I know he kind of got, like, undercut.
100%.
But what's interesting, Nico, is that it didn't prevent... You would think, if that's how Texas whiskey started,
yeah,
this guy learns everything that Dan's been doing, and as we finish the story, you would think every other distiller would be like, cool, I'm going to hold everything close to the vest, and that hasn't been the case.
Because of, I firmly believe it's because of the way that it eventually went down. So Chip goes,
finish the story.
Chip goes back to,
he hangs out, Dan shows him everything that he's doing.
He shows him stuff, and I mean, Chip knows what the hell he's doing. It's not like he needed to go be taught by Dan, but he wanted to know what Dan was up to. So he found out, and Chip comes back, and he comes back to Waco, and he's like, hey, we're releasing a whiskey. They're like, what do you mean? He's like, here are the laws. You don't have to age it for more than 6. Like, age it for 6 weeks. Let's release a whiskey. Go find a liquor store that'll sell our whiskey, and let's release a whiskey.
He's stuck in a barrel for 6 weeks.
And so I don't know how long it was. It might have been 2 weeks. I don't remember.
Right,
but like the first Balcones that was for sale, the first Balcones sold the first Texas whiskey.
Right.
Balcones sold the first Texas whiskey.
We can't talk about the quality of that. It was just sold.
Garrison made the first Texas whiskey and sold the first Texas bourbon.
Correct.
That's what it is. Done and done. That's the story.
I just think it's so funny because you would think with kind of what a bit of a messed up story that is, you're like, oh, that's not a great start for this situation, but it all has worked out.
But then Chip had to leave. And Jared is like the opposite of Chip.
Right.
And Jared is like so open and welcoming and wants everybody to succeed and is
Which
not
it's not just Jared. I feel like
everybody down there
we've had so far, and whether it's the Lone Elm episode, whether it's the Ironroot episode, as you guys watch more and more of our episodes, you'll see that it's nobody holds cards close to their vest. It's like, cool, right. I'll share with you. I celebrate you. This is cool. I mean, the whole Grayson project is about, hey, we're blending. Yep. You win, you win, you win. Let's put it all in a bottle. I just love the spirit of this, and I feel like if I had to have an overarching thing of what's so cool about this book is the fact that it's this spirit, which is I think extremely rare.
The thing that I like about it, and Chip Tate and Company is not in the book,
right?
Because they don't have any whiskey, and so
they'll be in volume 2.
Yeah, no, there's 100%. Dude, I cannot wait for his whiskey. Like Chip is such a good whiskey maker.
Well, you've already talked.
Frankly, when I heard that he got kicked out of Balcones by whatever, I was like, ooh, now we've got 2 people who know what they're doing. This is gonna be awesome. So I adore Chip. Like I think he's a fascinating individual.
What's so crazy is I remember the conversation, we sat and had right before you started working on the book, which also was partially the birth of this show, right? Was like, okay, so what do we do now? What's the pivot? And the minute you got done with the book and we started touring distilleries or going to the festival and stuff, like I've heard you reference, I can't wait to what I'm going to put in the second, as this book continues to evolve, because so much continues to happen.
There's already new stuff that I'm like, man, I wish y'all come out last summer. Y'all be in the dang book right now.
No, it's great.
Yeah, and there are bigger companies that are making changes that may warrant them showing up in the book. Like there's a lot. Man, the Texas whiskey scene is ever evolving, and the book it's very in the same way that Texas Cocktails was. It is a snapshot of what Texas whiskey is at that moment.
Right?
Yeah, and absolutely. And there hasn't been one before. And so if you are obviously if you're watching this show, you like Texas whiskey in some manner,
or curious about it,
or curious.
Sure.
I feel like it's, I mean, yes, I wrote it, but I feel like it does a really good job of kind of covering everything that's going on. And so on top of the profiles, there are the imagery is beautiful. Like, my favorite thing about Cider Mill Press is the way that they design the books, because they are just gorgeous.
It's gorgeous because the Texas Cocktail books, which you should also get, is a gorgeous book. Like, the pictures are great. It's just a whole.
It's so pretty.
It's such a pretty book.
So freaking pretty.
And this one is equally as amazingly designed. Like, you partnered with good people, and so
on top of the distillery profiles, I gave the opportunity to anybody who wanted, not anybody, but I kind of tossed it out to a whole bunch of people. I was like, hey, if you want to write an essay, I would love your own words in here. So you've got Ty Phelps, I believe he's talking about rainwater. Jonathan Licorice, he's got an essay about the use of heirloom corn. Rob Arnold has something about
Andalusia,
Andalusia, Iron
Root,
Root, TX whiskey. Okay. Chris Seals from Still Austin has a
good dude.
Yeah, he has an essay about starting a distillery.
Yeah.
Just like there's a whole bunch of their own words. And then there's also all of the stuff that kind of makes it fun. So like there's like location profiles. Everything's broken up by region. So if you want to use it as a travel guide, you totally can.
Yeah.
And man, it's I'm really, really proud of this. It's like I wrote 67,000 words.
No, it's great. And like you said,
there's so many.
They could use this as a guide if they want to do their own tours. And this is a reason you should go to texaswhiskeybook.com, right? So all the things I said before, you're going to get 15% off the book. You're going to get an autographed copy if you want it from Nico. You're going to get, there's going to have a virtual tasting. We're going to have events. But this is something, and I'm going to talk about this now. Nico be like, we haven't discussed all that yet. We're working on putting together tours. And so if you ever thought, this would be really cool to do a tour with Nico and then put up with Jimmy on the side, is the people that are pre-ordering this book are going to have the first opportunity to join us on some of these tours. And so we're going to put those things together as well. And it's going to be super fun.
Man, it'll be a blast.
Like
we've I've already kind of tossed it out to a bunch of distillers, and they're like, "Oh, dude,
right. They're like,
that'll be awesome."
Okay, right.
Yeah, that's going to be great. I'm like, yeah, all right. I saying yes to this book, saying yes to this show, saying yes to all of this has kind of put me in a position where I'm going to do my damnedest to champion Texas whiskey until all of the bourbon drinkers out there have at least tried it.
No,
and
I love it, man.
Like this is what I'm doing now. So like I'm all in. I'm all in on Texas whiskey now.
No, I decided, and I thank you for letting me tag along on this journey.
Yeah, man.
And it's going to be fun. So this is what you need to do. You need to go to texaswhiskeybook.com. You need to get your copy right now. You're going to get the autograph. You're going to get 15% off. All the things we've talked about is going to be super fun. We're just getting started. And I just want to thank you for popping into the show. I want to thank Vokal for having this opportunity to do this. Like, this literally is like the highlight of my week every week. I get to come in here and like talk with my buddy, and we drink Texas whiskey. And so
coming up, we've got we're gonna have I don't know the order, but we've got Brandon from Lone Elm.
Yep.
We have Robert from Iron Root.
Yep.
Coming up in a couple of weeks, we're gonna be recording with Alex from Balcones.
Yes.
We're gonna be bringing in all of the
Randy?
distillers. Randy Sullivan, who runs Someone Say Whiskey and Bourbon Real Talk.
And so what I would actually, where you guys could help us is, this is a new show. Like, we're having a blast in here, but really, if we're not serving you and answering your questions, we're not doing our job. And so where you can help is you can follow Nico at Texas Whiskey Book on Instagram, or me at The Coach Jimmy. Send us some DMs and be like, you know what, guys, I would love if you would answer this, or I don't understand that, because really, from the beginning of this thing is you got Big Brain Nico over there. You have me, who I feel like I'm learning a lot. It's so funny. When I go out, I told you this, spoken at an event 2 weeks ago here at the Fairmont in Dallas. I'm sitting there, and Garrison and Balcony, there's a few Texas whiskeys. And so I'm talking to everybody, and they're like, oh my gosh, Jimmy, you're an expert about this. Like, you should market this and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, I know nothing. And compared to the people that I'm surrounded with. But what it's cool about is that you surround yourself with the right people, and you do kind of learn this stuff by osmosis. And so more than anything, we just want to thank you. We want to thank Vokal for the opportunity to have this platform. Get the book, get plugged into our community. I'm looking forward to the Q&A, to the tours, to everything else.
Dude, drink Texas whiskey.
And drink
Texas whiskey. That's all this is about. Try Texas whiskey.
Is it bad that I judge bars now when I walk here in Dallas when I walk in?
No,
and
it's
I'm
the
like,
way that it should be.
And I go, how many Texas whiskeys do you have?
Like,
and when they tell me
you just have one.
None or one, I'm like, okay, well, can you do
that's a
something
shame.
else about that? It's a shame.
That's a real shame. There's an opportunity here.
There is an opportunity here. Nico, this has been fun.
Yeah, dude.
We're just getting started, bro.
Yeah, absolutely.
Guys, get the book, TexasWhiskeyBook.com, all the benefits. Follow Nico, Texas Whiskey Book on Instagram, The Coach Jimmy on Instagram. And until next time,
Cheers, y'all.
Cheers, y'all.